Gemini, Gemini, Gemini. What's up, guys? It's a beautiful night, a little chill in the air, and the moon is almost directly overhead as we speak. First, I'd like to apologize for the quality of the video here, but that's not important. I'm just trying to give a download of Gemini that hopefully has some fresh takes. And I happen to be in a unique position to do this and to give my testimony as well as just the basic information. So hopefully I can shed some new information than what you've heard before on other channels. So I have a stellium in Gemini, which is a 3-planet or more conjunction. I've got 3, and that is my Mars, Venus, and Mercury, in that order, all within about 4 degrees of one another. And so I'm going to try to channel some of that Gemini energy into use a little water to speak on some of my past experiences as well, in order to lay out some things that you haven't heard about Gemini. So let's start with the basics. So Gemini is the natural 3rd sign of the zodiac. It is an air sign, and it's mutable. Mutable meaning changeable, adaptable, as well as dissociative, or what's a better word? Causes decay or change, I guess you could say. Transformation, change, etc. It's a masculine sign, and it's the daytime placement of Mercury rulership. So it's ruled by Mercury. And Virgo has the night placement. So this is the daytime Gemini, daytime Mercury, placement. So a couple notable Geminis that are pretty high on the scene right now in different arenas are Jordan Peterson and Owen Benjamin. And like I said, I'm going to attack this like a Gemini, so this is probably going to be most helpful for people with a lot of Gemini energy in their charts, because I'm going to be zipping around to a bunch of different areas as we go. So, Gemini rules the hands and the lungs on the body, and the sign of Gemini is the twins. So that's why it rules the arms and the lungs, 2 of the twin positions on the body. And with that being said, I'm going to head to spark up a little hand-rolled cigarette here just to get into that Gemini energy a little further. It happens to be something that I rolled with my hands, and now I'm going to use my hands and lungs to smoke. So let's see if this helps. Now, okay. Let's jump right into this. So how do you spot a Gemini? Physically, Geminis have pointy cheeks. This is especially if they have a Gemini ascendant or a Gemini sun. They look like 2 triangles that are facing towards the observer of the Gemini. So they're pointed out directly at the person that they're looking at. They're often youthful in appearance, and their mind stays youthful as well because of... So the motto of Gemini is I think. I think. So Geminis are always thinking. Thousands of thoughts run through their heads in minutes. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this kind of a nature, of the I think Gemini, the hands and the lungs. So Geminis, I'm not going to do this in any order. Geminis often have a lot of nervous energy, especially in their arms, hands, shoulders, feet even. So they can be very twitchy. They like to tap their fingers, and they always like to be occupied in doing something. Geminis are great multitaskers. This is where the mutability, of all the air signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, Geminis think the most, with the most variety and the most changeability. So this can also lead them to change their minds very often, which gives them some of the bad rep. So if you ask a Gemini to do something, and then the next day they don't show up, then either they've changed their mind or they've had so many thoughts in between now and then that they've forgotten. So these can be some of the common pitfalls. Geminis forget things. They think many different thoughts about one topic. They change the subject often, just naturally. But let's talk about some of the positives of Gemini. Geminis have great pattern recognition. Because of the amount of things that they process and think about, they begin to see patterns of action and of ideas and of conversation, how a conversation is going to go, because they've been in so many and analyzed and thought about so many different conversations. that they can see the direction or the limitation or when the conversation's going to end. They have an innate feeling of how conversations are going, and they're expert at moving between conversations and between realms. They're not the type of person to sit down and read an entire book in every case, as much as they are to read the summaries or to listen to podcasts instead about a book, so that they can learn about 5 books in the time that someone would spend learning about 1. So with this in mind, a lot of Gemini's information can be somewhat surface level. Some people use the word superficial, but having some Gemini energy myself, I wouldn't like to say that. But they try out all kinds of different things to think about. So they'll think about just about anything that comes to mind. So they can jump between any realm of conversation. Now, one thing to know about mutable air is air itself is the only element that's found in the 3 other elements. Air is needed to create fire, air is found in water, and air is found in earth. So, being mutable air, they are the most adaptable and changeable, you could argue, of the entire zodiac. Some of the other positives is, especially in men, Geminis are very polite and smiley, and good at manners and at entertaining, and they're good guests at parties, because they're not just going to sit there at the table and eat their food silently. They're happy to entertain conversations and to start conversations, etc. Let me think. Also, one of the superpowers that people don't know too much about, and Geminis themselves often overlook or don't place as precisely as they may, is that Geminis can read other people's thoughts. In certain occasions, they can pick up the thoughts of other people and what other people are thinking. And this is different than a intuitive level feeling that a water sign may get, or a vision that a fire sign may get. It will come to the Gemini often in the Gemini's own voice. So it appears as if it's one of your own thoughts, in the same sound and everything in your head, and it shows up in the same patterning. But if you pick it apart and really think about a conversation afterwards or during, then you'll realize that you're not necessarily, it can affect you if you have a water placement, but you're not intuitively feeling what the other person's thinking. You're picking up some of their exact thoughts, and you can start to anticipate what they're going to say while you're speaking. I've noticed this myself, is all often, it also has to do with the pattern recognition thing, is more than a superpower almost, because the pattern recognition of thinking, you can think about people's faces, about all the different things that you've seen in conversation before. So based on the expressions and the way that they're speaking and the words that they choose, you can begin to start to understand what they're thinking about and whether or not they like the conversation, etc. But also, you'll actually get other people's thoughts in your head based on just looking at them and being in their sphere. That kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some pitfalls that Geminis in the modern era especially should be aware of. Geminis, the women, because this sign is ruled by Mercury and it rules the hands and the lungs of the body, then texting and social media and constant technology usage for men and women is a common pitfall for Geminis. For men especially, and this pertains to myself, if you have a lot of Gemini energy, then you can become addicted to video games because it stimulates everything you want. You're using your hands physically, and you're encountering new experiences and thoughts and things to think about, and that kind of thing as well. Especially if you have Mars in Gemini, I would say that would pertain. Other pitfalls are trying to change the conversations too much, especially on fixed signs. Some people would like to talk about the same topics. So the best way to approach that is to attack the same topic that the person wants to stay on from many different angles. But other people still can't hang with you when you do that. So it can be tough. You just have to choose your battles and your times to communicate and your things to think about out loud with other people. What else? I want to give some personal testimony. My phone's running low on battery here, so I'm going to have to cut this in a little bit. So I want to get to what I was going to get to. So Geminis make good class clowns and good jokesters. They're often thinking ahead of other people. They're many steps ahead of their people. So another pitfall is not to tease people with slower minds, and in a negative way. I shouldn't say just tease, but not to diminish or put other people down because it takes them longer to get to where you got with your pattern recognition and with your thinking prowess and your speed, especially if you have Mercury in Gemini. But yeah, personally, I was a class clown myself, and often I would tell jokes that, well, they would land. So, but I would stick to cliches back in those days. That's when I was a lot younger. Anyways, I don't want to get lost in the waters on that one. So class clowns, jokesters, good party guests. They're cooler on the inside. So a lot of people don't know what a Gemini's thinking when they're seeing them, because the Gemini's presenting themselves as they know they should present themselves, with a smile and with courtesy and with manners. But a partner or a date may not be able to know what the Gemini's thinking at all. Like, he treats me really nice, but I don't know how he feels. He wasn't physically affectionate. He didn't tell me how he felt. He didn't really tell me what he loved. He just talked about anything I wanted to talk about and brought up some interesting food for thought as well. But you can hang out with the Gemini for a while and not really know what they value or what their intentions are, because the Gemini is good at hiding those things, or just kind of naturally does it. Anyways, the intentions aren't always clear to the Gemini themselves, because the Gemini is concerned with thinking about new things and experiencing new things and talking to new people, etc. What are some of the other things? I took some brief notes. The nervous energy is a big one. Gemini should find something to do with their hands. I wanted to play the drums for a long time. I never pulled the trigger, but there's still time. And that's a perfect activity for a Gemini. You get to use your hands, you get to innovate, you get to think. Painting, writing, drawing, cooking, boxing, martial arts, anything that uses the hands and can get some of that nervous energy out, I would recommend picking up one of those activities if you have a lot of Gemini energy. If you have Venus, if you know somebody or have Venus in Gemini, then more stimulation will come from the intellectual activity and from the being able to mentally connect and to experience things with one's partner than through physical sensation or through material gifts and experiences and possessions and such, like an earth sign, or through the feelings and sexuality of a fire or a water sign. More so, it'll be an intellectual mind to mind. So they're going to want someone who's witty, who's active, who's able to keep up with them in conversation and in thought, or at least to fill in some of the areas of which they lack. Because the Gemini themselves is aware of what they lack, and that's why they often delegate tasks or leave things to other people or inform other people of their situation, etc. Also, a Gemini can learn a lot from one of its trine air signs, Aquarius, in the fact that the Aquarius can become more detached and fixed in its thought patterns, where the Gemini is extremely mutable. So one activity I would recommend for a Gemini is to ponder one thought or experience, probably through writing it down or just through bringing it up to mind, that you've had, one belief system even, or philosophy or idea that you've created and that you want to study, and to go over that same thing over and over again at different times. So come back, leave yourself like a flag in the sand to come back to, because you can often just go from thought to 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 thought, and 30 thoughts ago you don't remember what you were thinking. So you have a lot of gems that you've thought of and that you've spoken on, that if you return to, you could polish off and use more often, which would be more of a Libra and Aquarius quality. So to try to stabilize your changeable nature a little bit in that way. Yeah, so I talked about how Gemini see the future, and that's through pattern recognition. So for example, let me think of a time. It mostly comes up for me in conversation or in watching others converse. If I'm in a class, for example, while I'm listening to the teacher lecture or teach an example, I'm thinking of questions or queries or debates or ways that they're wrong the entire time in my head, to the degree that I'm paying attention. So I'm running through thoughts and ideas while the teacher's speaking, and my classmates are doing the same. Now, just based on speed, not on being more intelligent or anything like that, just on my ability to change thoughts and to entertain more thoughts than others, the likelihood that I've thought something and brushed it aside and began to think of something else that somebody else in the class is thinking is higher than if I were a slow thinker. So I'm thinking things that somebody may say, and I'm also calling back to past experiences of what I've heard people say when a professor is saying something like this. So like, if a professor is going on about a belief system, like say they're espousing some feminist ideology or some colonial ideology, like people came to America and stole the land from the Native Americans. Regardless of which side of that I fall on, I know all the common things that someone might say when that topic is brought up. So then I'll wait, and someone raises their hand, I look over at that person, and based on how they look, and maybe based on if I can pick up any of their thoughts, just from the room, from the atmosphere, from the space, from the waves, the energy, etc., then often I can know what they're going to say before they say it. Maybe it's a headline in a newspaper that came out earlier that day, and I was on YouTube and I saw a video in which someone gave an argument, because people are very limited in the arguments they give. So a Gemini is more likely to look at some piece of information and to retain it, and then that will just be called up in their own mind when someone else starts talking about it. That's why they're so relatable and so mutable in their communication, is because they've thought about things, and somehow, especially with Mercury and Gemini or Moon and Gemini, it just comes to them. When someone's talking about something, it's like a file opens up and the Gemini has the whole folder of everything that they know about that topic. So it's really exciting, and that's where a lot of the nervousness comes as well, because when you get those insights and those ideas, you want to throw all of them out into the world and say, here, look, I've done the research. I have 50 different things to talk about based on what you just brought up. But you have to choose and be selective and judgmental. You have to use some Saturn on your own ideas and choose wisely which ones you speak on, because one of those 50 things that just opened up when the teacher started to talk about colonialism may be able to change the classroom and the way people think about it. It may be more valuable than the others. One of the points is gonna affect people in your folder more than the others. So as a Gemini, you need to become selective in what you say, or someone with Gemini energy, because you often have too many things to say, right? So I'd say I'm going to leave it on that. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope that I provided some insights, and I'm going to give a shout out to Dolo the Pilot Man for inspiration and for all of his knowledge, and to Owen Benjamin for his recent streams and for going down the rabbit holes he's going down. All right, love you guys. Peace.